this on. All right, good afternoon. Hey, we're go ahead and get started on time because I want to make sure I got enough time and get you out of here on time too. So my name is Nancy Godin. I am here representing parents of addicted loved ones. I'm currently the regional coordinator consultant for them. I started as a facilitator for them about a little over 4 years ago. And that was in 2018, and just kind of moved into a regional lead role. That was a volunteer role after that in 2019, and have just fallen in love with this organization and everything that we represent. And I'm going to tell you more about it today. And so since have taken on this role as well. I am also come from a background where I'm a registered nurse. I've changed roles and to something very different. So, I did the usual work in the hospital, did wound care for 6 years, and since have transitioned into addiction recovery. So, and that's been in the last 2 years that I've done that. Also, I'm working at an intensive outpatient center now, and I am a CACDT, working towards my CADC 2. And also trying to get my board certification for psychiatric and mental health nursing as well. Now, I say all this is going to put a bunch of letters behind my name, but those roles don't mean a hill of beans except for the one role that I can tell you that I have, and that's mom. I was the mom, or I am the mom of someone who has struggled with substance abuse disorder. That role right there outweighs everything else that I can put behind my name. So we'll go ahead and go to the next slide. Do I click it? Yeah. Okay. Look at there. All right. Okay. So we know that we had the pandemic that has been going on. It has often been said that we had the pandemic within the pandemic. As bad as the effects were of the disease of the COVID-19 itself, we know that we had the ripple effect going on after that. Part of the ripple effect has been the increase in addiction, the increase in the relapses, and certainly the increase in overdoses. Where this came from is isolation. It came from being, our kids were removed from schools. We had job losses that came along with this, and people just had these coping strategies that didn't necessarily work. A lot of people turned to drugs and alcohol as a way to cope. There was loss of connection. When we're in isolation, there is a loss of that connection. And there is a phrase that's in addiction recovery that says the opposite of addiction is connection. So if we're losing the connection, then we're going to go to the opposite direction. So that's been one of the big problems that have come from the pandemic within the pandemic. There we go. All right, most of you, go back. All right, most of you probably know the statistics. You're in here because you probably work in the field of some sort. So we know we had approximately 108,000 overdose deaths in 2021, and that was an increase of 31% from previous year. 246,443 deaths per year due to drugs and alcohol. That's 675 deaths per day. And an estimated 40.3 million dealing with substance use disorder. And we got to include the families and add to that as well, because the families are absolutely affected. And another statistic that actually came out in my local community, I'm from the Augusta, Georgia area. And one of the statistics that came out, it was just about 2 weeks ago, actually, that a local news organization had said that we had more fentanyl overdose deaths than traffic fatalities already this year. And I know that that is the same story for a lot of communities going on around along this country right now. And that is a staggering statistic. Another statistic that's really troubling is that 85% of the prison population has an active substance use disorder or were incarcerated for a crime involving drugs or drug use. There is a documentary that we show in our Parents of Addicted Loved Ones group called Pleasure Unwoven. This is a physician, Dr. Kevin McCauley, who was in addiction himself, and he went to rehab many years ago. And he said he was told there that he had a disease. And he said, wait a minute, I'm a physician. What do you mean I have a disease? I know what a disease is. So he went on a 10-year research to do, to really research the choice versus disease debate. And out of that 10 years of research came this documentary, Pleasure Unwoven, where he proves that addiction is a disease. And the National Institute on Drug Abuse highlights the many benefits of family involvement in recovery. So for many years, families just were not included in the recovery process. This is really something that's just recently kind of come across in our treatment centers. So if we are seeing an increase in this, then how will this impact the prison population as well? And it's affecting our families. So all of this, I'm sorry, I need to back up. All right, so all of these people that have been in the prison population is also affecting those families as well. Because when our loved ones are incarcerated, that's going to affect us as well. So now we have the drug issue going on, as well as incarceration that we're dealing with, and that separation that we have. So for many years, families have not been involved in the recovery process. And that is something that has really needed to improve. And it says here that getting involved in a loved one's recovery does improve the chances of long-term success while improving the household function and family members' own mental health. And that's really what the goal of PAL is to help the family become more stable and healthy. Go back. All right, so there was another article that was done, the family's role in addiction and recovery. Most patients seek substance abuse treatment because of positive family involvement. But can we guarantee this? Of course we can't, but statistics are proving more and more that the more that families can get help for themselves, the increased chances that they have of seeking recovery for themselves. All right, so parents and addicts. Mike Speakman is the author of this book that's down here, The 4 Seasons of Recovery for the Parents of Alcoholics and Addicts. Some of the quotes that he has in there is, there is no other relationship like that between a parent and a child. Although parents have the most power and influence over their children, when addiction enters the picture, the situation mysteriously reverses. Now the child is in the driver's seat. It's hard enough as parents to transition from having that minor child to an adult child. Throw addiction into the mix and it is much more difficult. So why does this happen? How does this happen? And more importantly, what can be done about it? So these are the kinds of things that we address in our PAL meetings, and he has addressed in his book, The 4 Seasons of Recovery for the Parents of Alcoholics and Addicts. Now, Mike Speakman is an addiction counselor in Arizona, and he is actually the founder of Parents of Addicted Loved Ones. As he was counseling those with substance use disorder, he realized how sick our family members were as well, and the help that we needed. So he decided to start the Parents of Addicted Loved Ones group. Now, that's not what it was called then, but he decided to start some meetings for the families. Way back, this was in 2006 when he did this. And bless his heart, he held that meeting for 8 weeks straight before he even had the first person come to the meeting. But thankfully, after all of his patients, today we are now a national organization that has about 160 meetings nationwide. Okay. Still. Okay, something's not, okay. Okay. Sorry about that. Okay, So the effects that it has on families is he finally saw that we needed help ourselves. Families. Well, think about what is a family. A family is a unit, right? A unit of people that have the well-being for each other at hand. Now, I think, especially as a nurse, I think of a family as a body. And we have to have everything working together well in our body for it to be healthy and to function properly, right? And so when one part of our body, when something goes wrong with one part of our body, other parts of our body kind of rush in to try to fix what's going on. That's kind of what happens in families too. We have that one person that may be having some problems, right? Just like if we were to have an illness in our body. And then the other, some other family members may try to rush in and try to fix the problem. Now, the problem is that just like in our body, many times our body can overcompensate and sometimes can create more problems in those areas. This also can happen within the family unit. So what is the role of the family? We're going to be role models. We're going to lead by example. These are some of the things that we do at Dress and Pal. So we want to make sure that we're the role models. We have influence. Even though when we're dealing with a family member that has substance use disorder, it can be very difficult to try to show love and encouragement in those moments and to try to give those words of encouragement. But because if we do, then what we're doing is we're planting seeds. We never know what words that we say to our loved ones is still going to be instilled in them and come to fruition later. We just don't know. Okay. And the changes that we make as family members can lead to changes in our loved ones. That's really what we hope the side effect of our behavior changes are. I can tell you one story that stands out. It's my co-facilitator at my meeting. Her name is Carol. And she is very much a vocal advocate for PAL. And she shares her story openly about her son and the struggle she's had with her son. Carol's has had about over 20 years of experience with her son with substance use disorder. And it's been very much an up and down experience. So his recovery and relapse, like we know about many of those stories. So she started coming to the PAL meetings not long after I started mine. And when she first came, she was really resistant to some of the things that we were teaching because it's very difficult for anyone to make certain behavior changes. And eventually, though, she did. And there was one lesson that one day just really resonated with her. And she said that it was when we talked about how we treat our adult children. Are we treating them as children, like minors, or are we treating them as adults that they are? And so she decided to go home and actually apologize to her son for treating him like a child. He was in his 30s at this point. And that just made an impact on him. Now, when she first started coming to the meetings, he told her, I don't know who it is that you're talking to. I don't know who this woman is, but you just need to stop going there. You just need to stop listening to her. I don't know what you're getting from them. But as she slowly started making those behavior changes in herself and then had that encounter with him, after that, he said, hey, can I get some of her cards so I can give them to my friends and so they can take them to their families. So that was the kind of change. I mean, I have witnessed it. I've witnessed it. This whole family, the whole dynamic in this family has shifted within a good 3-year period. And it's been absolutely amazing. He still struggles, but the whole family dynamic is just amazing. She feels peace and joy finally for the first time in her life. So here is another article about the opioid crisis. We know we've been talking about the opioid crisis for a few years now. This is an article that was put out in March of 2017. And this article articulates the many strains on families that comes from addiction and the benefits of joining a support group such as PAL. So there are many, many strains that come from addiction. And so why is it that having a support group can help? So we can see that we have the loved one's substance abuse problem that puts a stress on the family member, and the family member just holds on and really takes on that strain. So then we have two options. We can either seek support and help for ourselves and learn healthy ways to deal with this, or we're going to go to our unhealthy coping skills, which often ends up hurting not only ourselves, not only the loved one, but the entire family in the process. So what are some ways that a support group can help? Well, we can let them tell their story. The first part of the healing process is actually opening our mouth and speaking it. And when you're in a room full of people that are struggling with the same thing that you are, the feeling of realizing that you are not alone is overwhelming and so relieving. You can get relevant information. We're talking about all of the things that are going on even currently right now. And we're able to get information from experts that we're bringing into the meetings. And those kinds of things are just going to further help. We're discussing ways of coping and responding. I love one of my favorite lessons that we have is the react versus respond. I always say the entire world needs the react versus respond lesson. I think we would all be in a better place if we had that. But we learn those coping skills through a couple of different ways in PAL. One of them are those lessons that we get that are written by Mike Speakman, an addiction counselor. So we get actually some professional advice in there, but we also have each other's experiences that we're able to share. We can say, you know what, I went through the same thing that you did. This is what I did and it worked. Or this is what I did and it didn't work. So being able to share those experiences with one another and just the fact that you know that other people have gone through the same thing that you have, again, it just helps. But we're able to discuss what has worked, what hadn't, and how we can better cope. We have a support system. Oh my goodness. Support systems are huge. In addiction recovery, that's one of the very first things that we try to teach is they need a support system, right? So do the families. I say over and over again that as I have started working myself in addiction recovery and realizing that the same recovery process that they go through often we should be mirroring it as families. So many of the lessons that we are teaching in the Addiction Recovery Center that I work at, I'm able to spill over and use with my families as well. So having that support system is huge. And sometimes we all need a little bit of extra help. So we're able to possibly just maybe encourage some of the members to seek some individual counseling and to let them know that that is okay, that there is nothing wrong with that, and that it's going to do nothing but help them. You know, I do feel like we're finally getting out of the stigma of the mental health and seeking help for mental health, and I'm thankful for that. But so many people do come into this group having that stigma in their head, and they're afraid to go get help. And so letting them know that there is help out there for them is vitally important. All right, so back in November in 2018, there was an article that came out in Money magazine. So we know that addiction has caused a big financial burden on families. So this is where Money magazine came in. The couple that's featured up there, that's Kim and Michelle Humphrey. And Kim is actually the director of Parents of Addicted Loved Ones. And there were 4 families that were featured in this article, and 3 of the 4 families are Powell families. Now, Powell and Kim believed so much in Powell that he became the director of Powell. So in this article, there were, like I said, there were many things talked about as far as the financial aspects. So as far as like Kim and Michelle's story, they have 2 sons that were suffering from substance abuse disorder at the same time, if you can just imagine 2 sons. They were in and out of rehab. They were in and out of hospitals. They paid for cars. They paid medical bills. They paid legal fees. They handed their sons cash for food, for gas, for clothes. And then they finally realized that all that money was going towards drugs. And then they tried to give them gift cards instead, which can be, again, turned in for money. So Kim is actually, he spent years as a public servant, as a police officer in Phoenix, Arizona. Thankfully, he had good insurance, so he was able to use his insurance to try to help his sons. But still, even with that, he spent more than $50,000 in this futile attempt to try to save his sons. The emotional costs, though, are so much more than that. And we know that there are many families out there that they are emptying out their 401k. They're getting second mortgages on homes, trying to save their children. And often, all they end up is bankrupt. Usually it's the money that's not helping them in the long run. And that financial strain on a family is very painful. And then we can start seeing the ripple effect of that, because now we have families that have conflict. We even see divorces happen as a result. Now there's another mom that was featured in here, Diane. And Diane is actually one of my cohorts. She is also a regional consultant for the Midwest for parents of addicted loved ones. And she also sought help. And she said that she spent more than $70,000 on 8 rounds of rehab, outpatient counselors, miscellaneous expenses. And I'm going to quote, because nobody can say it better than this. She said, "I remember walking through my living room one day and seeing my 130-pound son, who was supposed to be 160 pounds, sitting on the couch with needle marks in his arm. And I heard this voice saying, 'You're loving him to death.'" And that's a phrase that we often hear as family members, that we're loving them to death. It comes from all those enabling behaviors that we can find ourselves in. So she further says, shortly after Diane gave her son a choice, stay at a local mission center, check yourself into a free rehab, or move in with a friend. She just knew that she could no longer watch this happen in her home and contribute to what was going on with him. That is not an easy decision for a mom to make. It is extremely painful. And to try to come through these kinds of decisions without some support system, it's not good. It's very detrimental to our own health. So she said that she realized that if I had not given him that choice, he'd be dead or he'd be in prison. And those were the words that he told her. When after he sought help, he told her, had you not done that, I would be dead or in prison. So there are plenty of stories like Diane's, parents who get help for themselves, and in the process, change their child's life for the better. But often that's only after they've exhausted every other option. And I'm going to give you a little bit of my story too at the end of this as well, because I'm speaking this from experience. But the bottom line on their stories is that they both found help through PAL. They both went to PAL meetings. Kim says that PAL saved his own family. And Diane says the same thing. All right, so what is PAL? This PAL that I'm speaking of, Parents of Addicted Loved Ones, right? So we're a nonprofit that started in Arizona 7 years ago. And we provide free weekly meetings, and we offer evidence-based support, evidence-based curriculum, and peer-to-peer support. To me, those two things are like the magic potion. And I will tell you more about how we got to evidence-based, because that's been kind of a recent thing that's happened with us. Our goal is to give parents hope and the tools that they need to handle the challenges of addiction in a healthy manner. Oops. And oftentimes the addicted loved one responds by successfully pursuing recovery as a result of the changes that they learn how to make through our meetings. The last line of our preamble just kind of really says it all to me. And it says that our goal is to ultimately find hope and joy in our own lives, regardless of the choices of our loved ones. Because we can't guarantee what choices our loved ones are going to make, but we can still learn to find hope and joy. But we hope and we pray that the side effect of this is that they go and seek recovery. And, you know, anything that we can do to increase those chances, hey, let's do it, right? But the thing about PAL is that PAL is our recovery. Because families do need their own recovery. We just don't realize it at the time, but we really do need our own recovery. So what we are is parents helping parents. So we are peer-to-peer support, as I said. Every facilitator that is trained has to be the parent of someone with substance abuse disorder. And that's the beauty of it. Now we do offer very good training for each facilitator that begins a meeting. And then they are offered mentorship afterwards as well as they continue on with their meetings. So they're not thrown to the wolves, as I like to tell them. We're focusing on challenges unique to the parents and spouses of an adult that's found themselves in substance use disorder. Because we can learning about addiction itself is one of the key components. So we're going to talk about some of the lessons that we do go over, but focusing on us, focusing on how we need to better cope with what we're going through really is the focus and the challenge that we have. Parents struggle with the distinction between helping versus enabling, and PAL helps them to learn how to set healthy new boundaries. One of our lessons is an enabling checklist. It's not one of the favored lessons that we go through, but it is one of the necessary lessons that we go through, because often we are doing things that we just believe that we're helping, but we're actually hurting them in the long run. So it's very important to learn those things that we're maybe not doing, the help that we're not doing in a healthy way. And then learning how to set new healthy boundaries. You know, boundaries is one of those words that, unless you're familiar with it already, that is a scary word for parents, because they think that boundary means punishment. But that's not what a boundary is. A boundary is to protect us. And I'm sure all of you know this, but a boundary is to protect us. And usually what I'd say in my meetings is this: I'm a visual person. So I'm like, boundary, right? Put up the hand. And boundaries need to protect us physically, financially, legally, emotionally, and spiritually. And that's what I try to stress to our family members, that it's not about punishing anyone, it's about protecting ourselves in the process. So some of our lesson topics, we include the addiction cycle, and that's where we bring in that Pleasure Unwoven documentary that I was telling you about. I can tell you that from personal experience. It was learning the biologics and the psychology behind addiction that changed everything for me. It literally changed the course of my life. Because when I finally realized what was really going on in my son's brain, I realized that he wasn't the enemy, that it wasn't him, that it wasn't some kind of a moral issue with him. that I wasn't even fighting my son. It was the drug, not him. Traits and behaviors, that's an interesting one. So we often see that those that find themselves in addiction with drugs and alcohol have a lot of the same traits and behaviors. So it's kind of, I won't say fun, but it is kind of relieving to know that our loved ones are not the only ones that have these behaviors that are going on. Delayed emotional growth is really sprinkled throughout our lessons. Delayed emotional growth is something that we really hit on to try to understand why our loved one hasn't really grown up and why they have the behaviors that they do. They maybe have grown up physically. They may be grown up, they may be adults in a number, but not necessarily an adult in their behaviors. So we do talk about that. We talk about the role of the family and all of the different roles that many of us can take. Releasing your loved one and help the emotional detachment. To me, those kind of go a little bit hand in hand. And that's the scary part. That's the thing right there that really keeps families a lot of times from walking through the door. They are so afraid that we're going to tell them, you just need to kick them out on the street. And that's not what we're saying at all. What we're saying is you can love them unconditionally, but help them conditionally. It means detaching yourself from their chaos, not detaching yourself from them. And that's what we try to stress in there and kind of help ease the minds of the families that come in there. Setting realistic boundaries. We talk about, yes, we have to put those boundaries in place, but a boundary is not a boundary unless there's a consequence, right? So, so helping them to understand, helping families to understand that we got to give more than lip service, that we actually have to really stand firm on those boundaries and consequences. Financial strings, so that, and again, that's part of the enabling process. So we have this way of being able to write down all of these things that we pay for, and realizing sometimes that we are actually giving them money for drugs that we may not have thought of before. Recognizing relapse. Now, why would we want to know that? So we do talk about some of the signs of the possibility of recognizing relapse. And again, it's because sometimes our help has to shift a little bit in order to, in order to help them in a more healthy way. We're going to help a little bit differently when they're in recovery than when they're in active addiction. Usually one of the things that I say that I believe that as a mom was one of the hardest things for me was understanding I have two boys, and one found himself in addiction and the other did not. And trying to understand that I had to say no to one where I could say yes to another. And, I'm a mom that wanted to keep everything balanced and equal. Everybody's got to have the same Christmas gifts, same, amount of Christmas gifts and things like that. So those kinds of things are the things that we deal with. And it may seem little, but it's big. It's big to the families. It's a big deal. And we have lots of other topics that we also talk about, but it's all about our own behaviors and how we cope with the psychological stresses and the emotional stresses that we go through. All right, so PAL, as the organization itself, was incorporated in Arizona as a nonprofit in 2015. And it is overseen by a volunteer board. I was a member of the board. The board was a volunteer board. I was part of that for about a year before I took on this role. Because of the fact that it was volunteer, I ended up having to step down so that I could take this position. We've expanded from about 12 meetings in Arizona to more than 165 meetings in 35 states. So we are really, really growing. People attend online meetings from every state in several foreign countries. So one thing that we offer is 4 online Zoom meetings per week that all you have to do is go to palgroup.org, go find a meeting, register for one of the online meetings, and then they'll send you how to get the link to go on, and you can hop on to any of those meetings during the week. Now, the way the online meetings are done is that we have them on Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays, and every night of that week is the same topic. So if you were to be able to get onto a meeting on Monday, but maybe next week you couldn't jump on until Thursday, you're still getting the same topic that week. So we have those available as well, really in hopes too, not only to make it available to people who do not have a PAL meeting in their area. We're hoping that one day some of those folks will actually start in an in-person PAL meeting in their area and further expand it in their area as well. So here are some things that we hear in a PAL meeting. So when you hear the following, what comes to mind? I know he is using drugs, but I can't expect him to get a job without a phone and a car. If I just pay these bills one more time, it will alleviate his stress and he will get over this hump. Well, it only makes sense to get him insurance because it's illegal to not have it. Since he needs a car, I need to pay for insurance. If I can just track him on my phone, I can keep an eye on him and he'll be safe. Making my son live on the street is not an option. This is cruel, even though I know he takes drugs in my house and steals from me. I just got a nearly $700 utility bill, and I keep finding the thermostat set at 62 in the summer. When I come home from work, he denies changing it. I put a lock on my bedroom door and turn the breakers off to the stove when I'm not home and lock up my electrical box. You can imagine all of these scenarios are very stressful for a family. Some of these may or may not have been mine. All right, some stories from real life. So some of these stories came from, actually all of these stories came from some of the families in my meeting, the shed. So I had one couple that came to the meeting for a very long time before they moved. They had a son who had been struggling with a meth addiction for a very long time. And we know that with meth use, a lot of times there's violence involved in those. So they were experiencing that. They were really in fear for their own safety. And they felt like their son could not live in their home anymore. But they had a difficult time with this. So what they did was they bought a shed and they put it in the backyard for him to stay in. And the same son actually had ended up, he not just broken windows, he had like holes in the walls and everything, but he broke one of their windows. And they had had enough. They were kind of at their breaking point because so much damage had been done in their home at this point. So they decided to call the police. They felt like he needs to get a negative consequence here of some sort. So they did. They called the police. He was charged. And then they felt bad and hired a lawyer to get him off. There it is. Car, yes. So I had one mom that told her daughter, if you just will go into this 30-day inpatient rehab, I will buy you a brand new car when you come out. I don't know how many wouldn't take that offer. And I have this sweet, sweet man. He's an elderly man. His son is, his son just recently turned 50. He is still having issues with addiction. But when he was in his late 40s, his son was in his late 40s, he said, if I could just get him an apartment, I stocked him up with groceries. I paid all of his utility bills for him. I just wanted to take the stress off of him in order, for him to get better. If I can just do these things for him, then, we'll eliminate the stress and he'll get better. Well, who did that end up putting the stress on? The dad. right? And we're talking about a man who is 70 years old and has not retired yet. So those are the kinds of things that families are dealing with. It's very stressful. And when you're in the middle of all of this, it truly feels hopeless. Everything that we're doing over and over and over again is not working for years. And we just feel hopeless. So this is where PAL can come in. Now, I said earlier that PAL is evidence-based. We have evidence-based lessons. How did we get there? Well, we had this team of researchers at Northern Arizona University that agreed to study us. So what they did was in 2017 is when the initial evaluation started. Any new members that came into the groups could voluntarily send in their information to these researchers, and they agreed to be followed for a period of 2 years. And the purpose was to review the program, determine its efficacy, and quantify how it impacted the lives of parents who attended the PAL meetings. I mean, we need to be able to prove that what we're doing is right, and we want to know that what we're doing is the right thing. And additional studies have continued to quantify the effectiveness of the program on the participants. All right, so the research questions that were posed was this. How effective is PAL in providing an evidence-based substance abuse support program? How effective is PAL in improving the well-being of PAL members in their mental health and their physical health? And this is something that I'm so glad is coming more prevalent in our therapy, is learning that mental health and physical health are so intertwined. I can tell you my story on that as well, and how all of this affected me physically as well. So, and how effective is PAL in educating members on strategies to support their addicted loved ones' recovery? Strategies to reduce enabling, strategies to reduce codependency. So these were our findings. That PAL follows evidence-based practices rooted in cognitive behavior frameworks, emphasizes members developing effective coping mechanisms over therapeutic intervention. It helps members' well-being improve. It teaches members strategies to reduce enabling and codependency behaviors. They were less, so the impact on the addicted loved one, they were less likely to be using drugs and or drinking alcohol. So not only did they follow the well-being of the family members, but they also followed how well the loved one was doing as well. And it was found that the addicted loved ones were actually seeking help more quickly than those without help. So here is the feedback from the report findings. The primary demographic were women, 50 plus. Particularly, I know when I first started my group, it was mainly moms that were showing up. I can thankfully say that as of now, I have a lot more dads showing up than ever before, and that's really exciting. And the other piece that's really exciting too is it's not only just dads, just moms, but it's couples coming. And to be able to, for a couple to come and be able to get the same education and have that united front is big. And not only that, we're talking about the possibility of saving marriages when they're both coming. So I try to encourage couples to come. They attended weekly, and they attended more than 1 year. We typically recommend 18 months to really gain the tools that we need in order to cope better. Why people stopped attending? Because PAL provided me with the tools to help myself was the response. So that is pretty exciting. Another finding was that in-person meetings were most effective. Again, just like I said earlier, the opposite of addiction is connection. Kind of the same thing, because honestly, we're in there because we're, in a sense, addicted to our family members. So we want to make sure that we provide hope. Our mission is to provide hope through education and support to parents of addicted loved ones. Now, we say parents of addicted loved ones in our mission, but we welcome all family members, 18 or older, to come into our meetings. So we have spouses, I've had siblings, I've even had cousins in there as well. And our vision is to make Palmings available to all parents of addicted loved ones. Again, all family members, really, when we get down to it, to all addicted loved ones. Because we want families to find hope and joy in their own lives. So, one family story, and this is mine, what got me to PAL, because like I told you earlier, in order to be a PAL facilitator, we have to be the parent of an addicted loved one. So this is my son, Chris, as a baby and a toddler. Very, very sweet child. He was born when I was just 18 years old, so I was a young mom. He was cute, he was funny, he had just this great sense of humor about him. He was so respectful of like our elderly family members. And this is our family, just a typical average family. You know, we had mom, dad, 2 sons. We attended church every time the doors were open. I had them in summer camps in the summertime, and they played some sports. So we were pretty much an average family. So what happens and why and how bad does it get? Well, once adolescence hit, that's what happens to a lot of our children. They make new friends. They have a new peer group. And things shift from mom and dad just aren't that great, as great as they were anymore, not up here anymore, but the friends become more important. He went from someone who, I remember one of his elementary school teachers, we went for a parent teacher conference, and his teacher said, he just oozes with manners. And I was like, really, my child? But eventually, as time went on, things did start spiraling down. He ended up dropping out of high school. And things just really didn't get much better from there. And I'm going to further explain that. So how do we go from this cute kid who is just loving life to this? And I'm going to tell you the truth. This mugshot is from 2017. To prepare for this presentation was the first time that I saw this, because I didn't want to see it before. But I can tell you right now that seeing it again just reminded me of why I'm here and why I'm doing what I'm doing. So here are some pictures of where he ended up in those hard days. Like I said, he dropped out of high school. But he was getting jobs. I mean, he was doing pretty well at his jobs. He was like employee of the month within 3 months of some of the jobs that he was at. He was very well liked. He had a good business mind on his head that just amazed me. So I'm thinking, okay, it's not the end of the world. Yeah, he dropped out of high school, but not everybody, is school material. I'm okay with that, right? But then as time went on, and I noticed the changes. He started missing work. He started losing his job. His health had declined. I mean, he just went from this healthy looking kid to just about skin and bones at one point. You could just see the color in him changed. Honestly, I was watching my son die before my very eyes. And really, as I look back and trying to figure out how this started, how this happened, and we can try to figure out, the whys, but it's up to him to figure out the why, of course. But as I look back, I remember he was dating this girl that he absolutely loved. He dated her through high school, and she broke up with him. And he was devastated. And he told me that he had someone that offered him this pill that was going to help him feel better. And so that's kind of how he started. So as time went on, eventually he couldn't afford those pills anymore. And he transitioned into heroin because we know it's cheaper and easier to get. And eventually he had a hard time of being able to afford his heroin because, he kept losing his jobs. So in order to continue his heroin addiction, he decided to be a runner for the dealer. Now, you remember on one of those slides, if I can just track him on my phone and keep him safe, that was what I did every night. I sat in my chair in my living room, and I would pull out my iPhone, and I could see where he was at, those runs to Atlanta, those runs to Myrtle Beach. In my heart, I knew what was going on. But there was nothing that I could do to stop him and save him. But for some reason, I felt the need to just watch him on my phone. And then there was another morning that it really hit me that the things that I was doing, keeping him where he was not saving him. It was not helping him at all. I used to get up every morning and open up his bedroom door to make sure he was breathing. I just needed to see his chest rise before I went to work. Well, one morning I opened up that door, and there was the needle and syringe with a heroin in it sitting on his nightstand. And that was when it hit me. He can die right across the hall from me. I'm not doing anything to help him. And how am I going to feel if I open my door every day and look straight across at his? How am I going to live with this? Also, in the meantime, I'm finding my own ways of coping, which was food at the time. So I'd come home from work, I would sit in my chair, I'd pull up my phone, watch what he was doing, where he was at, and I ate. And so that was my coping. So by the time I was in my 30s, I had gained 100 pounds, and I was on blood pressure medicine. My knees hurt, my ankles hurt. So all of this mental and emotional stress that I was feeling was absolutely affecting me physically also at the time. I call it a slow fade. All of these things that I was watching happen to him, to me, was a slow fade. It wasn't something that happened overnight. And when you're watching it in like that slow motion, it just takes a toll on you over the years. I isolated. I didn't even talk to my friends and family about what was going on. I didn't even talk to my husband about how I was feeling because I was so ashamed. So what was my wake-up call? Strangely enough, my wake-up call was the same as his. So I came home from work one night, and I get a call from the Columbia County Sheriff's Department. It's the county that I live in. And I knew before they even said a thing that we have your son in custody. He's got 3 felony charges against him. He's been caught with meth and heroin and all of the paraphernalia in the bags and the scales, and it was in his car. The dealer was with him in his car. And I went into my first ever full-blown panic attack because all I could think about was my son's life was over. I called my husband and I told him what was going on once I finally could breathe again. And oddly enough, his reaction was much different than mine. He breathed a sigh of relief. He said, I know that he's alive tonight. And that just hit me. At first, I was a little bit upset, but I realized afterwards, I was like, yeah, you're absolutely right. We know that he's safe tonight. He called me every day for a week while he was in there, because my husband and I had decided that we were not going to get him out unless he agreed to go get help, because we needed to know he was safe. And let me tell you, I had no idea how many times that they would let them call. And it was painful because he was going through withdrawals in the jail from heroin and methadone, because I found that he was also going to the methadone clinic. But he did agree to get help. We finally got the help that he needed. And here we are today. The picture on the right is the day he came out of rehab. You can see he's got meat on his bones, and he was so healthy looking. And the picture on the left, he wanted to go to an Atlanta Braves game before he went to Sober Living from the rehab. So we agreed to do that. He loved the Atlanta Braves. And here we are today, 5 years later. We've reached that benchmark of 5 years. He's happily married to a beautiful, wonderful woman. And this is him with my first granddaughter. And he is the proudest dad I have ever seen. And this is him. Hold on. Good. There was with both of my granddaughters. My second granddaughter was born September the 16th of this year. So we have a brand new one. So here he is as a dad with his two beautiful daughters and his wife. It was those hard decisions that I had to make that changed his life. Had I bailed him out, had I just continued with the same behavior that I had been doing all of these years, I don't know where he would be today. I can tell you what he said. He actually said, I would not be alive today. He truly said he believes that. So that is what Parents of Addicted Loved Ones does for families. We're a free resource for families. We're easy to open in a community. All you have to do is contact us. We're going to put you through all of the training that you need. Like I said, we have the 4 national online meetings. We have local online meetings that are going to be starting soon, within the next few months. So that was my story. And like I said, that is the title and the role that means the most in me being here as a mom. Is there any questions, comments? Anybody have any questions? Yeah. Yeah, it's Pleasure Unwoven. Yep. Yeah. So if you want more information about PAL, their website is palgroup.org. There's tons of resources for families on there as well. And then if you're interested in starting a group, you can go to info@palgroup.org. We have meetings that meet in churches, in treatment centers, community centers. So if you work in a facility that has some extra space and you know some family members that would be willing to go through the training, contact us and we will get that training to them to get those meetings started. Because this is our goal. We want PAL in every city in this country because we know that it's needed. Okay. And that's us. Well, thank you.